My name is Ian Douglas, and I inherited a secret that destroyed my family 3 generations ago. A secret recorded on 8 rolls of 16mm film, hidden in a rusted metal canister, buried in the foundation of a house that was condemned and demolished in 1987. A secret that cost my grandfather his life, my father his sanity, and me everything I thought I knew about the world. The films are real. I've had them analyzed by experts who confirmed the footage hasn't been tampered with, hasn't been manipulated, hasn't been faked using any technique available in 1952 when they were shot. The creature on those reels exists. Or existed. And my grandfather died because he filmed it. I'm 53 years old, recording this in a storage unit outside Perth where I've hidden the films and myself from people who've been searching for both for the past 6 years. They found my house in Inverness. They found my boat. They found the safety deposit boxes in 3 different banks where I'd hidden copies. But they haven't found these. Not yet. Before they do, before they destroy the last evidence of what my grandfather witnessed, I need someone to know the truth. Not just about the creature, though that's part of it, but about what happens to families who see things they're not supposed to see, who document things that are meant to remain hidden, who inherit secrets that carry curses measured in generations. My grandfather was Hugh Douglas, a fisherman and amateur filmmaker who worked Loch Ness in the late 1940s and early 1950s. He was obsessed with the creature, not in the way tourists are, seeking entertainment or validation, but in the way scientists are obsessed with discovery. He believed the creature was real, believed it could be documented, believed that proof would change everything. He was right about all of it. Especially the part about changing everything. Hugh disappeared on August 14, 1952. His boat was found drifting near Urquhart Bay, empty except for his fishing gear and a camera he'd been using to film wildlife. The official report said he'd fallen overboard, likely while handling nets. Accidental drowning. Common enough for fishermen in those days that nobody questioned it too closely. But my father questioned it. Alan Douglas was 16 when his father disappeared, old enough to know something was wrong, old enough to remember the fear in Hugh's eyes the last time he'd seen him, old enough to hear the whispered arguments between his parents about the films and what he'd captured and people asking questions. My grandmother destroyed most of Hugh's possessions after he vanished. Burned his papers, smashed his camera equipment, threw away anything connected to his obsession with the loch. My father salvaged what he could, a few photographs, some journals, nothing that explained what had really happened. Nothing except a map. A hand-drawn map showing the foundation of their house, with a specific spot marked with an X and the words, "If I don't come back, dig here. Tell no one. Trust no one. Protect your family." My father dug 40 years later, in 1992, 2 weeks before the house was scheduled for demolition. He found the canister, found the films, and within 3 months, he was dead. If you're listening to this, if you found this recording somehow, you need to understand what you're getting into. This isn't just a story about a monster. This is a story about what happens when ordinary people stumble onto truths that powerful organizations want kept hidden. Subscribe to this channel if you're prepared for that truth. Hit that like button if you believe some evidence is worth preserving no matter the cost. Share this with people you trust, and I mean truly trust, because once you know what's on those films, you become a target too. My father watched the films once. Just once. Then he spent 3 months trying to verify what he'd seen, reaching out to marine biologists, Cryptozoologists, anyone who might be able to explain the impossible images captured on decaying celluloid. He was careful. He didn't show anyone the actual films. He just described what was on them, asked theoretical questions, probed for information. It didn't matter. They found him anyway. He died in a car accident on the A82, the same stretch of road where my parents had died years earlier. The same stretch that's claimed dozens of lives over the decades. Single vehicle, lost control, plunged into the loch. They recovered the car but not the body. The loch kept him, just as it had kept his father 40 years earlier. I inherited the films when I was 23 years old, along with a letter from my father that said simply, "Don't watch them. Don't tell anyone. Destroy them and walk away." I should have listened to my father's warning. Learn from my mistake. I didn't listen. I watched them. And now I understand why my grandfather hid them, why my father died trying to verify them, why I'm recording this in a storage unit with the lights off and the door barred, waiting for the inevitable moment when they finally track me down. Because what's on those films isn't just evidence of the creature. It's evidence of something much larger, much stranger, much more dangerous to know. I waited 3 years before I watched the films. 3 years of carrying that metal canister around, moving it from hiding place to hiding place, reading and rereading my father's warning, trying to convince myself to just destroy the damn things and live a normal life. But I couldn't. The films were all I had left of my grandfather. The only physical evidence that he'd existed beyond the handful of photographs and the family stories that grew vaguer with each telling. I needed to see what he'd seen. Needed to understand what had been worth dying for. I finally watched them in 1998, in a basement flat in Edinburgh where I was living after selling my fishing boat. I'd bought an old 16mm projector from a pawn shop, set it up in the darkened room, threaded the first reel with shaking hands. The film was degraded, the colors faded to sepia, the image scratched and spotted with age. But it was watchable. And what I watched made my hand shake so badly I had to pause the projector twice to keep from dropping the reels. The first 3 reels were standard wildlife footage. Seals on the shore. Birds diving for fish. Tourist boats in the distance. My grandfather's voice, I'd never heard his voice before, and hearing it for the first time in grainy audio made my eyes water, narrating what he was filming, noting the date and location and weather conditions. Then came reel 4. Dated August 10th, 1952. For days before he disappeared. The camera was mounted on a tripod, filming from the deck of his boat. The loch was calm, the morning light perfect. And then the water began to move. Not waves. Not ripples from wind or current. Movement from below. Displacement. The camera captured it perfectly, the way the water bulged upward, the way ripples spread in perfect circles, the way something massive was rising from the depths. The creature broke the surface perhaps 20 meters from the boat. My grandfather's narration stopped mid-sentence, replaced by stunned silence and the sound of the camera continuing to run. The creature was enormous, far larger than the grainy tourist photograph suggested, far more detailed than any previous footage. The neck was at least 5 meters long, thick as a barrel at the base, tapering to a narrow head that swung slowly from side to side as if surveying the surface. The skin was grey-green with darker mottling, scarred in places, almost metallic in the early morning light. But it was the eyes that stopped my breath. Even on degraded film, even at a distance, I could see them. Large. Dark. Intelligent. The eyes of something that was thinking, processing, aware. The creature circled my grandfather's boat. Slowly. Deliberately. The camera followed it, capturing every detail, the way the water sluiced off its skin, the subtle musculature beneath the surface, the grace with which something so large moved through the water. Then it dove. A smooth, controlled descent that barely disturbed the surface. And it was gone. The rest of Reel 4 showed my grandfather shaking hands as he fumbled with the camera, his voice returning in fragments, "My God, it's real, it's actually real. I need to film more. Reel 5 picked up the next day. August 11th, same location. This time my grandfather was prepared, had multiple cameras set up, had positioned his boat to capture the best angles. And the creature came back. This footage was even clearer. The creature surfaced closer this time, close enough that I could see individual scars, could see the texture of its skin, could see something that looked disturbingly like barnacles or some other growth clustered near the base of its neck. My grandfather's narration was steadier now, more scientific, approximately 6 meters of neck visible above waterline, head structure inconsistent with any known aquatic species, skin texture suggests, wait, it's looking at me. The creature had turned its head toward the camera, was staring directly into the lens. And in that moment, I understood something my grandfather had understood 50 years earlier. This wasn't an animal. This was something else. Something that knew it was being filmed. Something that was allowing itself to be documented. Reels 6 and 7 were dated August 12th and 13th. The footage showed the creature in increasing detail, surfacing at different times of day, in different weather conditions, sometimes alone, sometimes not alone. That was the part that made my blood run cold. In Reel 7, you could see movement in the deeper water. Shapes. Multiple shapes. Suggesting that my grandfather's creature wasn't alone. That there was more than one. Maybe several more. But it was Reel 8 that explained why my grandfather had hidden the films. Why he'd written, "Trust no one" on his map. Why he disappeared for days after shooting this footage. Reel 8 was dated August 14th, 1952. The day he vanished. The footage started normally enough. Morning light. Calm water. The camera mounted on the boat, pointed at the loch. My grandfather's voice, 4th consecutive day of filming. The creature appears at approximately the same time each morning, suggesting regular behavior patterns. I believe I've gained its trust, or at least its tolerance. Today I hope to. He stopped. The camera stayed running, but the narration cut off. And in the background, I could hear another voice. Too faint to make out words, but clearly human. Someone else was on the boat with him. The camera angle shifted, someone had moved it, turned it away from the water. For several seconds, the frame showed only the interior of my grandfather's boat, various equipment, fishing gear. Then the picture went dark, as if a hand had been placed over the lens. The audio continued. My grandfather's voice, agitated, "You have no right, this is my boat, you can't just." The other voice, clearer now but still indistinct, "National security, cannot be made public, orders to confiscate. My grandfather, I won't let you destroy this. The world needs to know." Another voice, a third person, "Mr. Douglas, please be reasonable. This footage poses significant risks too. The audio cut to static. When it resumed, there were different sounds. Struggle. Something heavy hitting wood. My grandfather's voice, frightened, "No, please, I have a family, I won't tell anyone, just let me." Should have burned them and scattered the ashes and tried to forget I'd ever seen them. A splash. Then silence. Then the camera being moved again, the lens uncovered, briefly showing two men in dark suits before the film ran out. Stop here. Listen to what I'm telling you. My grandfather didn't fall overboard. He was murdered. Murdered for filming something that someone didn't want filmed. And the people who killed him are still out there, still watching, still eliminating anyone who gets too close to the truth. Subscribe if you understand what that means. Hit that like button if you believe some secrets are worth dying to protect. Because what I'm about to tell you is why they're still hunting for these films 60 years later. I watched that final reel 3 times, trying to convince myself I'd misheard, misinterpreted, imagined the sinister implications. But there was no mistaking what had happened on that boat. No explaining away the sounds, the voices, the splash. My grandfather had been killed. And someone had taken the camera, had let it keep running just long enough to record their faces, then had presumably thrown the whole rig overboard, except my grandfather had hidden the films before they came, had removed them from the camera and sealed them in that canister and buried them in his foundation with a warning to his family. He'd known they were coming. Had known what they wanted. Had known he might not survive the encounter. And he'd protected the evidence anyway, hoping that someday, someone would find it and understand what he'd died to preserve. After watching the films, I spent 6 months in a daze. Went to work at the warehouse where I was employed, came home to my small flat, ate meals without tasting them, slept fitfully with nightmares of men in dark suits pushing my grandfather into cold water. I should have destroyed the films. Should have followed my father's warning. But I couldn't. Because my grandfather had died for them. My father had died investigating them. And I owed it to both of them to understand why. I started researching carefully. Very carefully. Never using my real name online, never accessing information from the same location twice, never leaving a traceable pattern. I'd learned from my father's mistakes. Whoever had killed my grandfather was still out there, still monitoring, still protecting whatever secret the films represented. I found others. Not many, but enough. People who'd seen the creature, who'd filmed it or photographed it or documented it in ways that couldn't be easily dismissed. And I found a pattern in what happened to them. In 1960, a tourist from London captured clear photographs of something in the loch. He sent them to the newspapers, gave interviews, attracted attention. 2 weeks later, his house burned down. The photographs were destroyed. The tourist survived but recanted his story, said he'd been mistaken, said it was probably just a log or a wave. In 1975, a marine biologist attempted a serious scientific study of unusual sonar readings in the loch. She received funding, assembled a team, prepared to spend 6 months collecting data. The project was cancelled before it began. Funding pulled. Equipment confiscated. The biologist's university position was terminated. She never published another paper. In 1983, a documentary crew filmed something surfacing near Urquhart Castle. Clear footage, professional quality, impossible to dismiss as misidentification. The footage was confiscated by authorities claiming it was needed for analysis. It was never returned. The documentary was never completed. Over and over, the same pattern. Someone captures evidence. Someone official appears, police, government agents, university authorities, always with legitimate-seeming credentials, and the evidence disappears. Sometimes the witnesses recant. Sometimes they simply go silent. "I don't have anything," I repeated. "Of course," the man said. "But if that changes, if you remember something or find something, please contact us." Sometimes they have accidents. My grandfather had been one of the first. But he'd been clever enough to hide his evidence before they could take it. And now, 46 years later, I had inherited both the evidence and the danger. They came for me in 2004. 6 years after I'd first watched the films, 5 years after I'd started my careful research, 3 years after I'd moved to Inverness and bought a small fishing boat to work the loch myself, partly for income, partly to understand what my grandfather had experienced. I was at the fish market in Inverness, selling the morning's catch, when a man approached me. Middle-aged, expensive suit, the kind of anonymous professional appearance that could be lawyer or businessman or government agent. "Mr. Douglas," he said. "Ian Douglas. I wonder if I might have a word with you about your grandfather." I should have run. Should have dropped my fish and my gear and gotten as far from that man as possible. Instead, I did what people do when they're not prepared for danger. I acted normal. "My grandfather? He died before I was born. Why would you want to talk about him? He was a fisherman here on the loch. An amateur filmmaker as well. We're doing historical research on the area, collecting stories and documentation from that era. We understand he may have left behind some films. Home movies, wildlife footage, that sort of thing. I don't have any of his films. Everything was destroyed after he died." The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Are you certain?" Sometimes family members save things, hide them away, rediscover them years later. If you did happen to come across any films, any at all, would be very interested in preserving them. For historical purposes, you understand. We'd compensate you generously. He handed me a card. Plain white, no company name, just a phone number. Anytime, day or night. We're very motivated to recover historical materials related to the loch. He walked away before I could respond. I stood in the market with his card in my hand, my heart hammering, understanding with absolute clarity that they knew. They knew about the films, knew I had them, knew I'd watched them. They were giving me a chance to hand them over voluntarily. To take the money and walk away. To avoid the fate that had claimed my grandfather and my father. I went home and moved the films that same day. Took them from their hiding place in my boat's hold and relocated them to a storage unit on the opposite side of Inverness. Then I started planning. If they'd approached me openly, that meant they were confident they could handle me quietly. Make me disappear, or discredit me, or simply wait for me to make a mistake. They weren't worried about the films getting out because they were certain they could recover them before that happened. They were probably right. But I had to try anyway. Had to find a way to make the films public, to get them to people who could protect them, to ensure that my grandfather's death hadn't been in vain. I just had to figure out how to do it without ending up like my father, drowned in the loch with my secrets. The man with the card came back 3 times over the next month. Each time more insistent. Each time with subtly different threats disguised as offers. And each time, I told him I didn't have the films. Part 2 will reveal what happened when they stopped asking politely, and what I finally understood about why those films are so dangerous that people have been dying to suppress them for 70 years. They stopped being polite on a Tuesday night in November 2004. I came home from the fish market to find my flat had been searched. Not ransacked, that would have been too obvious, but carefully, professionally gone through. Drawers opened and closed. Cupboards examined. Floorboards tested. Books pulled from shelves and replaced almost perfectly. They'd been thorough. They'd checked every possible hiding place. And they'd found nothing because the films weren't there. They were in a storage unit 3 miles away, registered under a false name, paid for in cash 6 months in advance. But the message was clear, the polite phase was over. They would take what they wanted, with or without my cooperation. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in my ransacked flat with a cricket bat across my knees, jumping at every sound, watching the door, waiting for them to come back. They didn't. But the next morning, I found something they'd left behind. An old photograph, placed deliberately on my kitchen table where I couldn't miss it. The photograph showed my grandfather standing on the deck of his boat, smiling at the camera, very much alive. And written on the back in neat handwriting, Hugh Douglas, August 13, 1952. One day before he learned that some knowledge is too dangerous to possess. It was a threat and a promise. They were showing me they knew everything about my family history. Showing me they had access to materials that should have been lost decades ago. Showing me that I could end up exactly like my grandfather if I didn't cooperate. I moved the films again that day. 4th hiding place in 6 months. This time to a safety deposit box in a bank in Perth, 2 hours away. Then I started making copies. Not to release them, not yet, but to ensure they couldn't be completely destroyed. I found an old film transfer service in Glasgow, paid cash, used a fake name, made digital copies of all 8 reels. Burned them onto DVDs, hid them in 5 different locations across Scotland. If they came for me, if I ended up like my grandfather, at least the evidence would survive. While I was making copies, I studied the films frame by frame. Watched them in slow motion, paused on details, tried to understand what my grandfather had captured that was worth killing for. The creature itself was extraordinary, yes. Clear footage of something that officially didn't exist. But I'd seen other Loch Ness footage, grainy, ambiguous, but still footage. Why was my grandfather's film special enough to warrant murder? The answer was in reel 7. In the background. In details I'd missed on first viewing because I'd been focused on the main creature. At approximately the 14-minute mark, when the primary creature was surfacing near the boat, you could see something else in the deeper water. Not just movement, actual shapes. Multiple shapes. And if you paused at exactly the right frame, if you enhanced the contrast and studied the image carefully, you could see they weren't natural. Structures. Underwater structures. Geometric. Deliberate. Built. My hand shook as I studied that frozen frame. My grandfather had filmed more than just the creature. He'd accidentally captured evidence of something else. Something that suggested the creature wasn't just an animal living in the loch. It was living near or in or around something that had been constructed. Constructed by what? By whom? And how long ago? I went back through all 8 reels with new eyes, looking for more evidence. Found it in reel 6, a brief shot of the loch bed during a moment when the water was unusually clear. You could see patterns in the sediment, lines that were too straight to be natural, formations that suggested foundation walls, support structures, things that had no business being at the bottom of a Scottish lake. This is what they were hiding. This is why they killed my grandfather. Not because he'd filmed a creature that could be dismissed, debunked, explained away, but because he'd filmed evidence that something had been built in or under Loch Ness. Something old. Something that changed everything we thought we knew about human history in Scotland. Subscribe if you want to understand what that means. Hit that like button if you believe some archaeological discoveries are too significant to suppress. Because what I found next made me realize the conspiracy wasn't about protecting the creature, it was about protecting something much bigger. I started researching the loch's history. Geological history, archaeological history, everything I could find. And I discovered something that made the underwater structures make terrible sense. Loch Ness is roughly 10,000 years old in its current form, created when the glacier retreated at the end of the last ice age. But the valley it sits in, the Great Glen, is much older. And archaeological evidence suggested human habitation in the area going back at least 8,000 years. Which meant there were 2,000 years when the valley existed but wasn't yet filled with water. 2,000 years when the bottom of what would become Loch Ness was dry land. Land where people could have lived, built, created settlements that were then flooded when the glacier melted and the water rushed in. The structures in my grandfather's film could be ruins. Ancient ruins, preserved under water, hidden for millennia. And the creature could be something that had lived alongside those ancient peoples. Something that had survived when everything else had drowned. That's what they were hiding. Not a monster. Not a prehistoric survivor. But evidence of a civilization that shouldn't exist, in a place it shouldn't be, at a time when humans were supposed to be primitive hunter-gatherers, not builders of underwater cities. I needed to verify my theory. Needed someone who could look at the films with expert eyes, who could confirm or deny what I thought I was seeing. Someone who could be trusted not to immediately report me to the authorities who'd been searching for the films. I found Dr. Moira Campbell through academic papers she'd published on prehistoric Scottish settlements. She was in her 60s, semi-retired from the University of Edinburgh, with a reputation for controversial theories about advanced Neolithic cultures. Perfect. Someone already outside the mainstream, already accustomed to resistance from traditional archaeology. I contacted her carefully. Anonymous email, vague descriptions, no mention of Loch Ness or creatures or conspiracies. Just a query about whether she'd be interested in consulting on potentially significant archaeological footage that required discretion. She agreed to meet. We arranged a rendezvous in a cafe in Edinburgh, neutral ground, public enough to be safe but quiet enough to talk. Dr. Campbell was sharp-eyed and skeptical, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in muddy excavation sites. You were very mysterious in your email, Mr. Smith, I lied. John Smith. I appreciate you meeting me, Dr. Campbell. I have footage that I believe shows underwater structures in a Scottish loch. I need an expert opinion on whether they're natural formations or something else. Which loch? I'd prefer not to say until you've seen the footage. She studied me for a long moment. You're talking about Loch Ness, aren't you? You filmed something in Loch Ness. What makes you say that? Because you're being paranoid. Because you're using a false name. Yes, I can tell. and because you're exhibiting all the signs of someone who stumbled onto something that makes them afraid. I've seen it before. Loch Ness has a way of making people paranoid. Have you ever researched Loch Ness yourself? I tried 30 years ago. Applied for funding to conduct underwater archaeological surveys. Was denied. Applied again. Denied again. Eventually, I was told very clearly by someone very senior that Loch Ness was off limits for academic research. Too much tourist interest. Too much potential for publicity that might damage Scotland's image. The usual bureaucratic nonsense. What if it wasn't nonsense? What if there was a real reason they didn't want anyone researching down there? Dr. Campbell leaned back in her chair. Show me your footage. I showed her. Not all 8 reels, I didn't have them with me, wouldn't risk bringing them to a public place. But I brought my laptop with the digital copies. We went to her office, locked the door, closed the blinds, and I played the relevant sections. The creature. The underwater structures. The geometric patterns in the sediment. She watched in silence. When it finished, she was pale. Where did you get this? It was filmed by my grandfather in 1952. He died the day after he shot the last reel. Died how? Murdered. For filming this. And I think you know why. Dr. Campbell closed her laptop. Stood up. Walked to her office window and stared out at the Edinburgh skyline for a long time. Then, I'm going to tell you something that ended my marriage and nearly ended my career. Something I've told perhaps 3 people in 30 years. And then you're going to leave, and you're going to destroy those films, and you're going to forget you ever saw them. What did you discover? In 1974, I was part of an excavation team working on a Neolithic site in the Highlands. We found artifacts that didn't make sense. Tools that were too sophisticated. Stone carvings that showed structures we hadn't found any evidence of. And we found references, carved symbols, pictographic representations of something in the water. Something the ancient peoples had lived alongside. Something they'd built around. She turned to face me. We reported our findings. Within a week, the dig was shut down. Everything we'd found was confiscated for further study. Our notes were sealed. We were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. I thought about my grandfather. About him hiding those films in his foundation, trusting that someday someone would find them and understand, and we were told that if we ever spoke about what we'd found, we'd be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act. Why? Why would Neolithic artifacts fall under the Official Secrets Act? Because they weren't just artifacts. They were evidence of a civilization that officially doesn't exist. Evidence that there was something here, something significant, long before we're supposed to have been capable of it. And that evidence included clear depictions of creatures living in the lochs. Large aquatic creatures that the ancient peoples had apparently lived alongside peacefully. Dr. Campbell wouldn't help me publish the films. Wouldn't even acknowledge that she'd seen them. But she gave me something else, confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that the conspiracy was real, and that it was bigger and older than I'd imagined. There are things in Scotland that the government doesn't want known, she told me as I was leaving. Not for tourism reasons. Not for economic reasons. But because they fundamentally challenge our understanding of human history. Your grandfather's films are part of that. And if you try to make them public, you'll end up like him. So I should just give up? Let them bury the truth. I'm saying you should consider whether the truth is worth your life. Because they've had 70 years to perfect their methods of suppression. They're very good at it by now. I left Edinburgh that day understanding that I had a choice to make. The same choice my father had faced. The same choice my grandfather had faced in his final moments. I could destroy the films. Walk away. Live a quiet life and die of old age in my bed. Or I could fight. Publish the films somehow, get them into the public eye, force a conversation that couldn't be suppressed. And probably die doing it. About him taking a beating, being thrown into the loch, dying with the knowledge that his evidence was safe. I thought about my father. About him spending 3 months carefully investigating, trying to verify, trying to do everything right. And dying anyway, because careful wasn't enough when you were up against an organization with unlimited resources and no oversight. And I thought about myself. About what I owed to the 2 generations that had come before me. About what I owed to the truth. I made my decision. But before I tell you what that decision was, I need you to understand the weight of it. The people hunting these films have been doing this for 70 years. They have resources. They have authority. They have a willingness to kill. If you're still listening, if you believe this testimony matters, then subscribe. Hit that like button if you think truth is worth dying for. Share this with people who believe some secrets are too important to keep hidden. Because what I'm about to tell you is how I tried to get my grandfather's films to the world, and what happened when I succeeded. I spent 3 months planning. Made more copies. Hid them in more places. Sent encrypted files to people I'd never met, with instructions to release them if anything happened to me. Built dead man switches and fail-safes and backups to my backups. Then, in March 2005, I uploaded portions of the films to the internet. Not everything, I kept some of the clearest footage in reserve. But enough. Enough to show the creature. Enough to show the structures. Enough to make people ask questions. I used anonymous servers. Untraceable uploads. Posted the videos to file-sharing sites and forums and conspiracy theory boards. Made sure they couldn't be traced back to me. It worked. The videos spread. Within days, they were being discussed on cryptozoology sites, news aggregators, social media platforms that were just starting to become popular. People analyzed them, debated them, tried to verify their authenticity. Most dismissed them as hoaxes. But some didn't. Some saw what I'd seen. Some started asking the right questions about what else was in the footage beyond just the creature. And that's when they came for me in earnest. My boat exploded on a Tuesday morning in April. I wasn't on it, I'd been warned the night before by a voice on the phone that said simply, "They know it was you. Get out. Now." I don't know who warned me. Don't know if it was someone inside the organization or someone outside it who'd been watching and waiting for someone like me to make a move. But I listened. I grabbed my emergency bag, cash, documents, copies of the films, and I ran. The boat explosion was ruled an accident. Fuel leak, probably. Tragic loss. The local paper ran a small obituary assuming I'd been on board when it happened. I didn't correct them. Being officially dead seemed like the safest option. I've been running for 6 years now. Never staying in one place more than a few months. Never using my real name. Never accessing the internet from anywhere they could trace. living on cash, sleeping in storage units and cheap motels, watching over my shoulder constantly. But the films are still out there. The portions I released are still circulating, still being discussed, still making people wonder. And I have the remaining footage, the clearest sections, the most damning evidence, hidden and waiting for the right moment to release them. They haven't given up looking for me. I see signs of their surveillance constantly, the car that follows me for too long, the stranger who appears in too many places, the phone calls that hang up when I answer. Eventually, they'll find me. I know that. They found my grandfather. They found my father. They'll find me too. But by then, it won't matter. Because I'm not the only one with copies anymore. If you believe my father's death shouldn't be meaningless, if you believe that sometimes the price of truth is everything you have, and it's still worth paying, share this everywhere. Share it with everyone. Because the more people who know, the harder it becomes for them to suppress. I've distributed them carefully, slowly, to people who know how to keep secrets and how to release them when the time is right. When I'm gone, when I can't be used as leverage or threatened into silence, the full footage will be released. All 8 reels. Every frame. Everything my grandfather died to protect. And maybe then, finally, people will start asking the right questions. Not just about the creature, but about what it means. About the structures in the loch. About the civilization that built them. About what we've forgotten or been made to forget about our own history. This is my final testimony. If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. Either they found me, or I've finally lost the strength to keep running. But the films survive. And that's what matters. My grandfather sacrificed everything to preserve this evidence. My father died trying to verify it. I've spent 6 years running and hiding to protect it. 3 generations of my family, all destroyed by the same secret. But the secret is out now. Not completely, not yet, but enough that it can't be completely suppressed anymore. And when the full footage is finally released, when people see everything that my grandfather captured on those 8 reels of film, they'll understand why we were willing to die for it. Subscribe to this channel because what I've shared isn't the end, it's the beginning. The full films will be released. The evidence will be seen. And the truth about what's really in Loch Ness, what's really under the water, what's really been hidden for thousands of years, that truth can't be buried anymore. Hit that like button if you believe my grandfather's legacy deserves to be honored. The more eyes on the evidence, the safer it becomes. Make it impossible to hide. Make it impossible to deny. This fisherman has proof his grandfather recorded the monster at Loch Ness before disappearing. And that proof is about to change everything. The films are real. The creature is real. The structures are real. And the conspiracy to hide them has been real for 70 years. But it ends now. 3 generations of sacrifice. 70 years of suppression. And finally, the truth comes out. Watch the water. Watch the evidence. Watch what happens when secrets that were meant to stay buried are dragged into the light. My grandfather is watching. My father is watching. And I'll be watching too, from wherever I end up when they finally catch me. The truth is coming. Are you ready for it? This recording was found in a storage unit in Perth, Scotland, in 2011. The unit had been rented under the name Hugh Douglas, the same name as Ian Douglas's grandfather. Ian Douglas has not been seen since 2010. His status remains unknown. In 2012, a comprehensive set of digitized films was anonymously uploaded to multiple video hosting platforms simultaneously. The films, dated 1952, show clear footage of an unidentified creature in Loch Ness, along with anomalous underwater structures that have yet to be adequately explained. The films have been analyzed by multiple independent experts. All agree the footage has not been digitally manipulated. No satisfactory explanation has been provided for what the films show. Several attempts have been made to remove the films from the internet. All have failed. The footage remains available. The questions remain unanswered. And the truth remains impossible to suppress.